Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a very close look at a story that, well, it really redefined media sensationalism in the early 1990s.
It did.
It's a
Yeah.
deeply complex legal and personal tragedy that just completely captured the nation's attention. We're going to be diving into the documented facts, the legal outcomes, and the cultural impact of the Amy Fisher incident.
And, our mission here is really to cut through the noise, to get past the tabloid headlines and the intense moral judgment that surrounded this case for, decades.
Right.
We're going to focus strictly on the sequence of events as laid out in the source material, the legal results, and the facts. And we have to say up front, this is a story that involves severe active violence.
Yeah.
So we have to approach it with a great deal of sensitivity, especially for the victim, Mary Jo Buttafuoco, who was, she was just horrifically wounded.
Absolutely. And the place we have to start really is the age factor. It's just critical to the entire story. Amy Fisher was born in August of 1974.
Mm-hmm.
The shooting itself happened in May of 1992. So she was only 17 years old at the time. And her age is just, it's tied to everything that follows. The public fascination, the legal mess, everything.
It really is. And that age disparity is foundational. You have to understand anything else. We're looking at a relationship that started around 1990.
Right.
Fisher was a high school student, 16 years old, attending Kennedy High School in Belmore, New York. And Joey Buttafuoco, the married man at the center of all this, he was 35.
That is a stark difference. It immediately establishes a power dynamic that is just.
Yeah.
It's central to how all these events escalate.
It is. And the sources are pretty clear about how they first met. It was seemingly innocent.
Yeah, her father just took his car to Buttafuoco's auto body shop. That was the initial connection. But it was Fisher who, she moved to maintain it.
And that's a really illuminating point from the sources. Fisher later admitted something pretty surprising about how she kept seeing him.
What was that?
She said that she had deliberately damaged her own car.
Deliberate.
Several times. As a pretext. A reason to keep going back to the shop, to keep that contact with him alive.
Wow. That detail suggests a really proactive level of engagement from her, even at 16. To keep this thing going.
It does, and the sources are completely unequivocal on what happened next. The relationship became an affair, a sexual relationship, while she was still legally underage.
And that one fact, would become the central legal problem for Joey Buttafuoco down the line.
Absolutely. It's the thread that connects the dots. It moves the whole narrative from a simple crime of passion to a statutory crime, which is a crucial legal distinction that we really need to keep in mind as we move forward.
Okay, so let's unpack that escalation. This takes us into the first part of our deep dive, the buildup and the attempted assault itself. When we look for a motivation, the sources paint a very specific and, frankly, a very chilling picture of the dynamic between them.
The alleged motivation, as it's presented in the source material, it's rooted entirely in their affair. During their conversations, Joey Buttafuoco reportedly complained to her frequently and in detail about his wife, Mary Jo.
He was sharing frustrations, intimate details.
Exactly. And this is where that dynamic you mentioned, it turns from inappropriate to dangerous. The complaints weren't just him venting.
No. The source material uses this very precise phrasing. It says he occasionally, casually insinuated to Fisher that it would be nice if someone killed Mary Jo.
That phrasing is so critical, casually insinuated. It's not a direct order, right? It's a suggestion, but it's woven into this already coercive relationship.
Right, and it completely changes the lens on her motivation.
It does. It suggests that her motivation wasn't just, say, simple jealousy or rage. The source says she undertook the action in an effort to please Joey.
To please him.
Which paints this picture of a minor who's seeking validation, seeking acceptance inside this deeply unbalanced relationship. And it seems she came to believe that this act of violence was the way to secure his affection, to get rid of the obstacle.
So with that alleged manipulation as the backdrop, let's look at the preparation for the assault. This is clearly not something done purely on impulse.
Oh, no. The preparation suggests a real calculation. First, she had to get the weapon. It was a FIE Titan .25 caliber handgun. That takes effort. That takes intent.
And she didn't act alone, did she?
No, she secured an accomplice to help with the logistics of the crime.
And that was Peter Goigenti, identified as an auto supply salesman from Brooklyn. He was her getaway driver.
The fact that she had a gun and a prearranged escape plan, it just confirms this was a premeditated trip with a criminal goal in mind.
So that brings us to the day itself, May of 1992. The encounter at the Buttafuoco home. It wasn't a direct confrontation at first. Fisher used a very specific trick, a ruse, to get Mary Jo to even open the door and talk to her.
Right, the fabricated story. It was designed very carefully to inflict emotional pain without immediately pointing the finger at Fisher herself. She told Mary Jo that Joey was having an affair.
But not with her.
No, with Fisher's imaginary younger sister.
And to sell this lie, she even brought fake evidence.
She did, a T-shirt from Buttafuoco's auto body shop. This was supposed to be the proof of this affair with the non-existent sister.
What's so chilling, and what really underscores the tension of that whole scene, is how long it went on. The source says the conversation at the door lasted for about 15 minutes.
15 minutes! Imagine that, 15 minutes of this calculated deceit. And the source notes that throughout this whole interaction, Mary Jo Buttafuoco was getting increasingly angry.
Understandably. And it's only when she tries to end the conversation that the violence erupts.
Exactly. Mary Jo finally tells Fisher to leave, and she turns her back to go back into the house. And at that moment, the source describes Fisher acting in a panic. She pulls out the gun.
Now, the mechanics of the actual shooting are very specific in the reporting. It suggests an unintended discharge during a physical struggle, even though the intent to do harm was clearly there.
Yes, the source material details that Fisher actually struck Mary Jo Buttafuoco twice with the gun.
With the weapon itself.
And it was that physical impact, hitting her with the gun, that caused the weapon to discharge.
The resulting injury was...
Yeah.
It was just catastrophic. The bullet hit Mary Jo in the right side of the head, severely wounding her. We really have to pause there and acknowledge the lasting, devastating impact of that injury. It changed her life forever.
It did. The consequences were immediate, and they were severe.
And the aftermath right at the scene, it just speaks to the chaos of the moment.
Total chaos. Fisher dropped the T-shirt and the gun, ran back to the getaway car, but then she turned around and ran back to retrieve them.
Before Guagenti drove off, this frantic attempt to clean up the scene was too late, though. Neighbors had heard what happened, and they had already called 911.
The medical response was, of course, critical. Mary Jo was rushed to the hospital, and she was in surgery all night. The doctors saved her life, which is incredible, but they couldn't remove the bullet.
So it's still there.
It is. It remains a permanent physical reminder of that assault.
And the investigation moved very quickly to figure out who did this. The police interviewed Joey Buttafuoco.
And despite trying to hide the affair, he did suggest to them that Amy Fisher could be the shooter.
But the real confirmation came the next day.
It did. Mary Jo Buttafuoco had regained consciousness. The police showed her some photos, and she was able to identify Amy Fisher as the young woman who had been at her door.
And that identification immediately connected Fisher to the crime, and it led directly to her arrest.
Which brings us right into part two, the legal tangle and, well, the media spectacle.
So Fisher was initially charged with the most severe crime possible for this first-degree attempted murder.
But the case never actually went to trial on that charge. Instead, a plea bargain was reached. On September 23, 1992, Fisher pleaded guilty to a lesser charge.
Which was first-degree aggravated assault.
Right. And, you know, it's worth digging into why that might have happened for you, if you're interested in the legal side. Attempted murder often requires the prosecution to prove a specific intent to kill.
Beyond a reasonable doubt.
Exactly. Whereas aggravated assault usually requires proving serious injury inflicted with intent to harm, often with a weapon. The specific mechanics of the shooting, the fact that the gun went off when she struck Mary Jo with it, that might have made it difficult for the prosecution to prove that specific intent to kill.
So the plea bargain was a more certain outcome for the state.
It's the value of a plea bargain. It gives you a certain conviction and a certain punishment. And the sentence for that plea was handed down on December 2nd, 1992.
5 to 15 years in prison.
Which secured a long minimum sentence.
But the public story around this whole legal process was completely hijacked by this incredible media event that happened just hours before she took that plea deal.
Oh, the infamous Paul Makeley tape.
In September 1992.
Yes. This videotaped conversation was aired by the tabloid show Hard Copy, and it just fundamentally changed how the public saw Amy Fisher.
It was a conversation between her and a gym owner, Paul Makeley. And she's on tape anticipating her prison sentence, talking about her future.
But she wasn't talking about remorse, was she?
Not at all. She was talking about legal strategies for her life after she was convicted. She was explicitly discussing marrying Makeley as a way to challenge laws that restricted conjugal visits in prison.
So she saw this legal challenge as a way to keep herself in the media.
Exactly. And this is where the most devastating quote for her public image comes out. She says, flat out, that she wanted to keep her name in the press because she could make a lot of money.
And then came the line.
And then the line that just defined the whole thing for so many people. She said, I figure if I'm going through all this pain and suffering, I'm getting a Ferrari.
A Ferrari, that one quote. It was the moment the public narrative completely shifted. It went from a potentially coerced, tragic teenager to this calculating media opportunist.
To broadcast that right before she pleads guilty to a violent crime, it just suggested this staggering lack of remorse, a primary motivation for fame and profit. It gave everyone this cynical lens to view her through from that point on.
It really did. It showed this immediate grasp of how to leverage the media machine. For the public, it turned the crime from a personal tragedy into a commodity. It confirmed what the tabloids were already suggesting, that she wanted notoriety more than anything.
Now, the legal mess wasn't just about Fisher. At the same time, there were proceedings against Joey Buttafuoco for statutory rape, and that's a really critical counter-narrative.
It is. Initially, Buttafuoco just denied the affair completely. And in October 1992, the Nassau County DA even said he wouldn't be prosecuted.
But that didn't last long.
No. The legal pressure and Fisher's own actions forced a reversal. By February of 1993, the case against Buttafuoco was reopened, specifically because Fisher herself had filed rape charges.
And she testified against him.
She did, which was a huge part of it. But the prosecution also had concrete evidence, hard evidence. They had hotel receipts that were signed by Buttafuoco on dates before Fisher's 17th birthday.
So there was no denying it. That was documented proof of the illegal relationship.
The evidence was just insurmountable. So Joey Buttafuoco eventually pleaded guilty to statutory rape in October of 1993.
And his sentence was 4 months in prison.
4 months. And that contrast, 4 months for the crime that set up this entire illegal power dynamic versus the 7 years Fisher ended up serving for the violent act that followed, that remains a huge point of debate about the fairness of the outcomes.
So while he served his brief term, Fisher was serving her sentence. She ultimately served 7 years, less than the 15-year maximum. Her release in May 1999 came because of a successful legal challenge to her original plea.
Right. A Nassau County court judge shortened her maximum sentence down to 10 years, which made her immediately eligible for parole, which she was granted. And the legal grounds were very specific.
What were they?
The judge found that Fisher had not been appropriately represented by her lawyer at the time she made that guilty plea back in '92.
Inadequate representation. We should probably spend a moment on that because that is a major legal turning point for her.
It is. The finding was that because she was a minor when she took the plea, her legal counsel had failed to fully inform her of all the consequences and all the alternative defenses she had.
So she couldn't have made a fully informed plea.
Exactly. The court ruled that this amounted to ineffective assistance of counsel, which is a constitutional issue, and that justified reducing the maximum sentence.
So that decision effectively closes the book on her time in prison. She's released after 7 years, and she immediately steps back into the spotlight. And this takes us into part 3. Her life after release and her transition from prisoner to public personality.
And she moved quickly to monetize that notoriety, pretty much fulfilling the promise she made on that Makeley tape years before.
Her first career move was into writing.
That's right. She became a columnist for the Long Island Press, using that name recognition she had to launch a career in journalism.
And her focus was still very much on her own story. In 2004, she published her biography, If I Knew Then.
And it was a commercial success. It became a New York Times bestseller, which shows you the public was still intensely interested in the story.
The source also gives us a little context on her personal life then. She got married in 2003, had 3 children, and later divorced in 2015.
But the past just has a way of coming back in these media-driven stories. The shadow of the Buttafuocos was always there. And in 2006, the media engineered this really controversial reunion.
She reunited with Mary Jo Buttafuoco.
Yes, for these televised sessions that aired on Entertainment Tonight and The Insider.
And the story they were selling was one of closure, right? Fisher said at the time that she wanted to heal and move on. It was presented as this powerful moment of reconciliation on television.
But the complexity of her public statements came right back just 2 years later. In 2008, Fisher made a contradictory statement. She said publicly that she felt no sympathy for Mary Jo.
With no exploration for the change of heart.
None. And this kind of public whiplash just highlights how hard it is to separate a real narrative of remorse from the constant need for media relevance.
And the reunion wasn't just with Mary Jo. Maybe the most bizarre example of how their lives stayed intertwined was the reunion between Amy Fisher and Joey Buttafuoco.
At the 2006 Lingerie Bowl.
The Lingerie Bowl.
Yep.
An exhibition football game. They met there for the coin toss.
That image. The former statutory rapist and his teenage former lover who shot his wife, appearing together for a publicity stunt at a pseudo-sporting event. I mean, it just perfectly captures the strange commodification of true crime in American culture.
It's a surreal image. So the final major turn in her career was her entry into the world of adult entertainment, which started around 2007.
And it began with controversy. A company called Red Light District Video announced they had a sex tape and that it had been sold to them by Fisher's then-husband.
So Fisher initially fought back legally. She sued them in November 2007 for copyright infringement.
She did, but that legal fight very quickly turned into a promotional strategy.
She settled the lawsuit surprisingly fast.
Very fast. By early January 2008, not only had she settled, but she announced that she'd reconciled with her husband and that she was going to do a promotional appearance for the very tape she had just been suing to stop.
So the focus shifted from a legal fight to just capitalizing on the publicity from that fight.
Exactly. And that promotion marked her full-scale entry into the adult film industry. In January 2009, she released a pay-per-view film that used her name explicitly, Amy Fisher, totally nude and exposed.
And her commitment to this new career path deepened. She signed a deal to become a professional stripper, committing to do club shows at least once a month.
And here we get an echo of that Ferrari quote from all those years ago. When she talked about her stripping career, she said she planned to keep doing it until her fans told her she was too old.
It's that direct connection again between her career and her ability to hold the public's interest, which all stems from the original crime.
And the production continued. In September 2010, another adult film came out, Deep Inside Amy Fisher. The company that released it said it was supposed to be the first of 8 films. It shows the scale of the brand they were trying to build around her.
She also made a move into reality TV, which is often a home for controversial figures. She was a cast member on the 5th season of Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew in 2011.
By June of 2011, though, the sources note another shift. Fisher stated publicly that she wasn't making adult films anymore, and that more or less concluded that high-profile chapter of her career.
So this whole arc, from crime in prison to a career built directly on that infamy, brings us to our final section, the enduring cultural footprint. The media's reaction to this crime is as much a part of the story as the crime itself.
It absolutely is. And what's really fascinating is just the speed and the sheer number of media adaptations. The public's appetite for this particular scandal was immediate, and it was just voracious. It set a new standard for how true crime would be consumed.
The speed is just unprecedented. The shooting is in May '92, and by the end of '93, there are 3 competing TV movies about it.
3 of them. The first, Amy Fisher, My Story, came out incredibly quickly in 1992, starring Noel Parker.
And then in 1993, the competition heated up. You had Casualties of Love, The Long Island Lita Story with Alyssa Milano,
And the big one, The Amy Fisher Story with Drew Barrymore. 3 separate, fictionalized versions of the same recent crime, with big-name actresses all hitting the airwaves almost at the same time.
It's incredible. 3 different angles on the same facts, all driven by this intense public demand. And that media saturation was only cemented later by her own adult films, which kept putting her name back into the culture.
But the influence went way beyond just the immediate true crime genre. The sources point to a really surprising connection that shows just how deeply the themes of this scandal worked their way into mainstream fiction.
This is the connection to the film American Beauty, right?
That's right. The source material claims that Alan Ball, the Oscar-winning screenwriter of that film, cited the Amy Fisher story as a significant inspiration when he was writing the script.
That is a remarkable cultural link.
It is. I mean, American Beauty deals with all of these themes: suburban despair, hypocrisy, forbidden relationships, the older man and younger girl dynamic.
And the Fisher incident, with its mix of the suburban setting, the married man, and the underage lover committing this act of violence.
Yeah.
It was basically a real-world template for all of those complex anxieties that Hollywood wanted to explore in the late 90s.
It is. And for you, the listener, that connection is a really profound point. It shows that the Amy Fisher story wasn't just disposable tabloid news. It tapped into these deeper societal worries about American family life, morality, and the dark side of suburbia. Worries that continued to fuel art long after the headlines were gone.
So to sort of synthesize this whole trajectory, we began with a crime A crime fueled by this coercive, illegal relationship between a minor and a married man, which led to a horrific, life-altering act of violence against Mary Jo Buttafuoco.
And from there, we charted the complex legal path. Fisher's plea deal, the Makeley tape completely changing the public narrative, Buttafuoco's conviction, and Fisher's eventual parole based on that ineffective counsel ruling.
And we finish by seeing her entire post-prison life become a direct fulfillment of what she said on that tape. A career built on monetizing her own infamy, from columnist to memoirist to adult performer, constantly keeping her name in the public eye through calculated media moves.
The sources just illustrate this perpetual feedback loop where her notoriety became her capital.
This whole life cycle, from violent crime to high-profile commodification, it really pushes us toward a final thought on the structures that allow that to happen. The incident itself was horrific, but her entire subsequent career was shaped by the media's reaction and the public's demand for the story.
Building on that, here's something to consider. What is the responsibility of media outlets when they cover the actions of minors in sensational crimes, especially when the details they highlight, like that infamous Ferrari quote, directly contribute to and maybe even guide that person's future commodification?
The fact that 3 movies were made almost instantly suggests this insatiable demand, and that demand directly helped write the entire second act of her public life. It's a powerful cycle, and remains just as relevant today whenever a sensational crime involving a minor dominates the news.